Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining tonight's presentation hosted by the City and County of Denver. My name is Vanita Curry, and I'm going to be your moderator tonight. I'd like to just wait one more moment to make sure everyone that wants to join this conversation can. So be with you in just a few seconds. Thanks for being with us. Again, my name is Vidita Curry, and I'll be your moderator tonight. First things first, if you are an English speaker, please click the icon that looks like a globe at the bottom of your screen to select your preferred language. We will be using breakout rooms to answer your questions later in our presentation. To do that, we need to make sure we accommodate our English and our Spanish speakers. So please make that selection now. And I'm going to join you because I've got to do it too. That was easy. For those of you who are Spanish speakers, I'd like to welcome Francisco to give you the same instructions. Francisco.
Thank you, Benita. Buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a esta excelente reunión. Esta reunión es un evento bilingüe y por lo tanto, tanto las personas de habla inglesa o de habla hispana tienen que seleccionar un canal y para poder escuchar la interpretación a un idioma o al otro. Se hace el favor de seleccionar el globo en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla y seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia. Thank you, Vanita.
I'd like to check in with my tech team and make sure that our Spanish speakers heard Francisco because I did not. Sarah, can you confirm? I'm getting a message from Sarah. We're good. All right, excellent. Before we go any further, I'd like to recognize some council representatives that are joining us and have supported us as we have done our community outreach. So thank you so much for the council representatives that are joining us tonight. As I mentioned earlier, we will be using breakout rooms during our Q&A session tonight. Everyone will be muted until we divide into breakout rooms. If you are interested in the corridor but live or work outside the corridor, please type the words room 1 in the chat box to GBSM host so we can place you in the correct breakout room. And please do that now. Once again, if you live or work in a neighborhood outside of the corridor, please type the words room 1 in the chat box so we can place you in the correct breakout room. Those who do not request room 1 will automatically be placed in room 2. Room 2 is for those who live or work along the corridor. Moderators have been assigned to each breakout room to help you ask your questions directly to the project team. We'll go over this again to make sure you know how to participate in the Q&A, so no worries there. We'd also like to make sure this is a safe place for people to ask their questions and to share their thoughts. So please remember to be kind and respectful of others and to kindly share your thoughts and questions. I am joined by several transportation experts from the City and County of Denver, including Ellen Forhofer, Tiffany Liu, Ashley Grace, and Dana Hoffman. They are all from the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Hannah Paulo is on our project team, and she will assist us in answering your questions. My colleague, Kaylee Showers, is also working behind the scenes to ensure this presentation is as successful as it can be. Welcome, team. Let's take a look at our topics for today. We'll start with a project overview and give you an update on the project schedule. After that, we'll show you the results of our concept survey and walk you through how we incorporated community feedback into our proposed concept designs. We'll divide into breakout rooms for you to ask your questions directly to the project team. If you're just joining us, I do want to remind you that please use the chat box to type the words room 1 If you live and work in the neighborhood, oh, I'm sorry, if you live and work in a neighborhood outside of the corridor, so we can place you correctly into the breakout room. We'll also close out the evening by introducing you to a new community input tool before ending the night with ways for you to stay engaged. I'd like to hand things off to Dana to begin our presentation. Dana.
Thanks, Benita. I'm glad to see everyone here tonight. So I just wanted to kick us off and spend a little time talking about how we get our work done. When we're putting things out on the street, there's lots of different programs and different funding sources that are available to us to get things done. So up on the screen, there are two examples of different ways we get things done. One of them is sort of our green infrastructure program. And we have specific goals and programs through our forestry department to actually plant new trees and identify healthy trees as well as ill trees. So there's that particular program that we use for that. We know we have a lot of questions on this corridor about that sort of green infrastructure component on our roadways. And then similarly, we have a separate program called the Sidewalk Gap Program. And this is a pot of money that we've gotten from our GO bond in 2018, thanks to taxpayers voting for it, as well as some of our general fund that we use to help start fill in sidewalk gaps over time. But neither of these are the funding source that we're using for today's project. So I just wanted to help you guys understand different ways that we do our work and how we use those different programs. So today we might focus more on what's in the street and bikeway, safety and crossing the street, but our other programs are going to be helping out with some of these other things that we really care about, like filling in those sidewalk gaps, making sure that we have good infrastructure on the street. We can move to the next one.
Great,
Thanks so much, Dina. I think we're going to hand it off to Ellen to take it from here.
Thanks, Benita, and thanks, Dana. As Benita mentioned, my name is Ellen Forthofer, and I'm the planning project manager for this corridor on East 12th Avenue. Really appreciate you all making time to be here and join us as we continue the conversation about this corridor. As you may know, this corridor has been identified as a proposed neighborhood bikeway. It's a very important east-west connection in the network that connects several neighborhood businesses, parks, and recreation, as well as all the way east into Aurora's bicycle network. It adds a total of 6.7 lane miles to the network and includes proposed changes to busy crossings. We heard a lot of this in our surveys earlier in the spring. And the designs include improvements at busy intersections like Colorado Boulevard, Monaco Parkway, Syracuse Street, and Quebec Street. But before we dive deeper into the survey results, on the next slide, let's look at what a neighborhood bikeway is. So as I mentioned, East 12th Avenue is a proposed neighborhood bikeway. A neighborhood bikeway prioritizes people who are walking, biking, and making local vehicle trips. So the design goals for these types of facilities are to change the street to slow traffic and really help at intersections to make crossing busy streets feel safer. You can see on this slide some examples of tools that we use to help make the vehicle speed slower, vehicle trips be more local versus cut through, as well as some of the improvements like signage and pavement markings to help note this as a shared, comfortable street for everyone using it. On the next slide, we'll talk through the program milestones. So you might recall that 12th Avenue was identified in Denver Moves Bicycles. This is the City and County of Denver's bicycle action plan. It was identified as an ideal candidate for a neighborhood bikeway, and then was studied in a feasibility study in 2015 through a series of community workshops to highlight the community input and really determine the feasibility of a neighborhood bikeway on this corridor. It was also confirmed as a bicycle priority street in the East and East Central area plans. And now in 2021, we're kicking off with a new series of community outreach efforts to help us continue the conversations that we began several years ago. And in March, we launched a survey to help us understand greater community feedback so that we could plug that into the design. Tonight is our second virtual community meeting of this year, where we'll share the results of that concept survey and identify how community feedback was incorporated into the concept designs. We'll also talk about how you can give further feedback on Conveo onto the concept designs themselves as the project moves forward. And as you can see here, once the concept designs have been finalized, we will move into the final phase, which looks towards construction as early as 2022. On the next slide, just want to highlight the bike planning process that DOTI uses. So and DOTI is the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Each corridor goes through steps of a planning process. So we begin by confirming the network, understanding that we're placing the right investments in the right places on streets throughout Denver. We then develop options, which turn into a concept design. From there, we finalize and complete the design before moving towards construction. So this project is currently in those middle stages where we've heard a lot of feedback, pulled that into an initial concept design, and tonight we're going to present on that concept design and ask for more community feedback to help us ensure that we're getting it right as we start to pivot towards construction. Again, that construction is anticipated to begin as early as 2022. So now I'll walk through the results of our concept survey before getting into how the feedback was routed and incorporated into the concept designs. So I'd like to thank everyone who participated in our survey. This was open earlier in the spring, and we had over 200 people complete the survey, with 93% of those people living along the corridor. So really appreciate everyone who took that survey, shared it with neighbors and friends. This feedback is very helpful because it directly impacts what the concept designs look like that we'll share tonight. Survey respondents identified Colorado Boulevard, Quebec Street, and North Monaco Parkway as 3 locations where they'd like to see improvements for people walking and biking. The top 3 priorities for the corridor were identified as 1, creating safer and more comfortable crossings, 2, improving sidewalks, and 3, reducing vehicle speeds along the corridor. The survey results also noted that 63% of respondents currently bike along the corridor, with 58% of people walking, rolling, or driving. It's worth noting people could pick multiple options. This is already a multimodal street, and it's interesting to see that play out in the survey results. It's also interesting to note that 36% of survey respondents noted that they commute along 12th Avenue. So they use 12th Avenue to get to and from work. On the next slide, just want to again highlight the concept survey confirmed the top 3 safety concerns of survey respondents. In terms of East 12th Avenue, the survey respondents noted that they were most concerned about crossing busy intersections along the corridor. We noted a few of those specific crossings earlier in the presentation. We also heard that there was concern about speeds of vehicles moving too quickly along East 12th Avenue, as well as the amount of traffic on the street, so the amount of vehicles. So on the next slide, we'll start to walk through the specific ways that we are incorporating feedback at points along the corridor. Again, want to highlight the full concept plans are up and available for community feedback. So these are really just highlights to show how the community feedback was incorporated into the designs. But again, you'll be able to leave feedback on those designs throughout the corridor, not just these intersections. So we heard from community members that traffic calming measures were needed, particularly between Madison and Colorado Boulevard. Tools that we use to help calm traffic include curb extensions, improved signage and pavement markings, as well as traffic calming elements like traffic circles. These are all pieces of a neighborhood bikeway, and have benefits like increased visibility for everyone using the road, slower vehicle speeds, as well as designs that encourage lower traffic volumes along the street. So really prioritizing local traffic and minimizing cut-through vehicle trips along the road. On the next slide, we'll talk about at Colorado Boulevard. This was one of the intersections that we heard about quite strongly in our survey. 50% of survey respondents noted that they wanted to feel safer while riding a bicycle along East 12th Avenue. And in our designs at Colorado Boulevard, we are actually introducing a cycle track, which is a two-way bike facility on the north part of 12th Avenue between Colorado and Ash Street. And this helps to better delineate space on the road for people biking as well as people driving and walking, and creates a safer environment overall to help cross at Colorado, which we heard in our survey was a difficult place to cross along the corridor. So this helps to improve visibility for everyone using the road. It slows speeds, and again, it clearly marks space for everyone using the road to help make it a comfortable condition for everyone. On the next slide, we'll talk about just overall, we heard that there was speeding of vehicles as a concern throughout the corridor. And so you'll notice the design at the bottom of this slide shows what we are proposing between Colorado and Ash. But what I'd like to highlight here is how all of the pieces of a neighborhood bikeway work together to create a slow shared street that's comfortable for everyone using it. So at Bel Air, there is a proposed traffic circle, which helps to manage speeds along the corridor. And at Birch Street, there's an example of curb extensions, which extends the space at crossings to shorten the crossing distance for people walking and biking and improve visibility for everyone using the road. These are elements that you'll see throughout the concept plans along the corridor, but just wanted to highlight that it is all of these design elements working together that help to slow speeds and make this a comfortable shared condition. On the next slide, we will talk about, if we can move to the next slide, please. At Monaco Parkway, again, we heard loud and clear in the survey that crossing busy intersections along the corridor was a concern. And at Monaco Parkway, it's an interesting intersection because of the jog that 12th Avenue experiences. So our current concept has people on bicycles using the path within Monaco Parkway and then crossing with an improved crossing on the north side of the intersection. This will include an RRFB, a rapid reflective flashing beacon, which is really just a fancy term for an improved crossing. You can press a button and it has flashing beacons, which indicate that the cars need to yield to people walking and biking to make a crossing here. It increases visibility as well as slows speeds on Monaco at this crossing. The next intersection that I'd like to talk about is 12th Avenue and Quebec Street. Again, this was one of the intersections that was identified as difficult to cross in the survey, and our current concept shows medians. So using paint and post to create a median, which helps to split the crossing for people biking and walking, as well as visually narrow the road to slow speeds and help ensure that everyone using the space is doing so safely and everyone can see each other. So this helps slow speeds, increase visibility, and it also decreases the crossing distance for people who are on foot, rolling, or on bike. The next intersection that we'll talk about is at Syracuse Street and 12th Avenue. At Syracuse Street, there is a proposed diverter. This means that we will be prioritizing local trips along 12th Avenue and vehicles traveling westbound won't continue through on 12th. They'll have to navigate to a different route to make that trip further west. But this is helpful on 12th Avenue because it helps to prioritize people who are biking and walking and keep this street a low volume street as we continue to grow in the city of Denver and really think about how we can use our transportation network as a whole to ensure that everyone has choice as they're getting around the city. So this helps to calm traffic, it slows speeds of people in cars, and it also increases visibility for everyone at this intersection. And I also want to note that at this location, we also connect to the bike lanes that are on Syracuse Street. And finally, the last intersection that we'll talk about today before going into the breakout rooms is Yosemite Street and 12th Avenue. Again, this intersection was highlighted in our survey of one that was difficult to cross and needed some improvements. Our current concept has curb extensions proposed as well as medians. And so this helps to increase visibility as well as shorten the crossing distance for people who are walking and biking. And it also slows turning movements of people who are driving vehicles. So overall, it helps slow everything down at the intersection, make sure everyone can see each other, and again, share that space safely and comfortably. And so with that, I'll hand it off to Vanita to bring us to our breakout rooms.
Thank you so much, Ellen. It appears that no one has requested room 1, so we're going to stay together in this conversation and just keep this main room as our breakout room. As I noted earlier, you've got the project team here that are standing by to ask your questions. What we'd like you to do is to use the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. When you click the reactions icon, you should see a virtual hand pop up, and click that and to raise your hand to ask your question directly to the project team. We do put these together and design them so that we have more conversation with you than we've had before. So we've got a lot of time to make sure you feel like you've gotten your questions answered. So please do take advantage of this opportunity to ask your question to the project team. I'd like to get things started off with Ellen. And just to ask you, what is the difference between a protected or buffered bike lane and a neighborhood bikeway? And how does the city determine what option to put there?
Thanks, Vanita. It's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, there are several types of bikeways within our network in Denver. Just like every road doesn't need to be a highway, and we have local streets as well as interstates, there are different types of bike facilities that fit the different needs of streets throughout our core or throughout the transportation network in Denver. So a neighborhood bikeway is a shared condition. There is no painted lane for people on bicycles, but rather it's a shared space for people on bikes and in cars with design elements, particularly at intersections that help to slow speeds and limit traffic volumes on that street so it remains a comfortable connection in the network. This is different from a bike lane, a buffered bike lane, or a protected bike lane because all three of those facilities have a separated painted space for people biking. It's not a shared condition. And Dottie looks at the existing conditions of streets. So we look at the existing vehicle speeds, vehicle volumes, as well as other aspects of the street like the width between curbs or even topography to help us understand what facility type is going to be the most comfortable and makes the most sense at different points throughout the network. So East 12th Avenue, for example, we looked at vehicle speeds as well as vehicle volumes, so the amount of vehicles on the street. And we have standards. Those standards helped us to determine that a neighborhood bikeway was appropriate for this street, given the design elements that we're proposing.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Another question for you. How does a neighborhood bikeway enhance safety for bicyclists and pedestrians?
Great question. So again, a neighborhood bikeway, it's not a separated space for cyclists, but rather a shared condition with a lot of the design elements occurring at intersections. And intersections is where most of the different modes, so people traveling in different ways, whether it's walking, rolling, on bikes, or in vehicles, that's where a lot of those different modes meet And at those meeting points, there can sometimes be opportunities for conflict. And so through a neighborhood bikeway, with the designs, we're able to mitigate and manage that conflict by slowing speeds, increasing visibility, and all of those things help us make it a safer, more comfortable shared space that really prioritizes people who are walking and biking along the corridor, which is something that we heard pretty strongly about East 12th Avenue from all of the previous planning efforts, as I mentioned earlier.
One of the things that I know we heard a lot from our survey respondents was concern around Colorado Boulevard. And Hannah, I was hoping that maybe you could help us understand why you offered the treatments you did along Colorado Boulevard specifically. I know that we can go back to the slide that shows Colorado Boulevard. If Sarah, if you can get to that slide for Hannah. But it was a high topic and a lot of concern around Colorado Boulevard. Can you walk us through why you chose the treatments you did for that section?
Totally. So the treatment here, as Ellen was talking about when she was on the slide, is a cycle track or a two-way protected bike lane. And that concept was actually developed as part of the corridor study for 12th, which was completed, I think, a couple of years ago. So there had been some initial concepts developed. And so we took those concepts and took a fresh look at the intersection and looked to see what was the safest and kind of most user-friendly for both bicyclists and drivers to sort of navigate this space. So that's kind of the background, and I'll just kind of quickly walk through. Really close to Colorado, there is a curb ramp proposed. So that allows bicyclists to easily get up on that sidewalk to navigate through the Colorado intersection.
Thank you, Hannah. A follow-up question is, as we described, speeding was really, this is to Hannah, speeding was really a concern. I think it ranked second on the list. Can you talk about what treatments are used to slow vehicle traffic?
Sure. So I think if we go to the next slide, I think that has two examples. Yeah, great. So so this is the expansion from Colorado to Ash, and I want to talk a little bit about Bel Air and Birch. And I know the colors are a little hard to see here, but at Bel Air, what we're proposing there is a traffic circle. And so what we want to do is, as people are approaching that intersection, we really want people to see that physical element in the middle of the intersection, and that will encourage them, that will really force them to slow down as they're navigating the intersection. The yellow triangles that are on the intersection approaches also define the space for where vehicles should be. So that's another sort of clarifying element with the intersection that also leads to slowing traffic. And at Birch Street, with the curb extensions, that does also improve traffic speeds and reducing them, because there is a vertical element to those curb extensions. Those, again, that's hard to see, but those red dots are proposed flex posts. And so that vertical element, again, creates a narrower width at that intersection and creates a slower speed for drivers.
Hannah, could you explain what a flex post is for those who may not know that term?
Sure, yeah. And I think we might have a
Yeah,
picture,
picture,
one of those
yeah.
examples. But it is, it's essentially I'm trying not to use the name to describe it.
Yeah. Let's see if we can get
But
that visual, because I think it was maybe on slide 15 or 16, Sarah, if we could show.
And I can jump in to potentially
Okay,
help.
great.
A flex post is basically a vertical element. You'll see them in some places around. Yeah, so here's a good picture. In the bottom right corner here, you can see the white posts. Those are flex posts. So they're vertical elements that help to visually narrow the road. And because they're vertical, it also helps to slow speeds, especially around the turning movements here as part of that curb extension. So it's just a flex post is the term we use for this material, this vertical post that we use to help delineate the space. And because it's vertical, it really helps to slow speeds and visually narrow the road more so
Thank
than
you.
just.
Thanks, Ellen. I want to come back to you with another question. Why does this corridor stop at Madison Street versus heading further west into Cheeseman?
Thanks, Benita. Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, the original extents of this project, it is a bond-funded project. It was originally from Colorado to Yosemite, and we extended it further west to Madison Street so that we could pick up a connection that didn't have any type of bikeway facility on it and connect into the bike lanes that begin just west of Madison Street. And so we viewed that extension as really completing this east-west connection in the network and plugging into that larger network into the facilities that already exist. So that's why we have those extents.
Thank you. Hannah, how does the design team decide to use different designs at different intersections, and are they interchangeable?
Yeah, great question. So it's a combination of a lot of different data points. So as some of the previous slides have talked about, there's been a number of different inputs that we've utilized to develop the concepts. So we've looked at the public input. We've also looked at the traffic volumes. We've looked at the speeds of vehicles along the corridor, whether we've looked specifically at the 85th percentile. And we also look at some of the larger intersections. We look at the turning movements. So looking to see if maybe there's a really heavy right turn movement. And we want to look to see how a potential improvement might impact the current traffic conditions that are there. So we're using all those things, and we're also looking at the existing traffic control. So looking at intersections to see, are they currently stop controlled? Is there no stop control at that intersection? And we also are looking at the surrounding conditions at that intersection. So, for example, there's a connection to a park. We want to make sure that that intersection can, accommodate more crossings there. So I would say they're not necessarily interchangeable, but we are adapting the proposed concept to intersections based on a variety of those components.
Thank you, Hannah. I've got another one for you.
Okay.
Why is diversion being proposed at Syracuse Street? And if we could go to that slide as well. Why is diversion being proposed at Syracuse Street?
Sure. Great. So to kind of reiterate Ellen's definition of a neighborhood bikeway, kind of the goal with the neighborhood bikeway is to create a safer roadway, a safer space for all users. And part of that is making sure that the speeds stay low and that it is comfortable for all users. So we have proposed a diverter at 12th and Syracuse. And I will just kind of walk through, because again, this is a little small, but eastbound on 12th Avenue can turn right on Syracuse, so south on Syracuse, and westbound traffic on 12th would not be able to go through on 12th. So we're really encouraging a safe street that has low volumes and low speeds.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Appreciate that. There was another question that I wanted to ask Ellen. Why is it important to create a network of bike connections?
Yeah, great question. And just want to remind everyone, you are able to unmute. So if any attendees have questions that they'd like to ask, please either raise your hand or unmute. We're happy to answer those questions as well. But in terms of your question, Vanita, of why it's important to create a network of bikeway connections, it's largely because as there are more connections, there's more choice available. And it is a city goal of Denver to create more and more choices and options for people throughout the city to determine how they can best move and get around to their daily things, whether that's school, the grocery, work, church. Apologies, my dog is saying hello. But it's important to have a network, because just as a strong network of streets, if you're in a car, makes it easier for you to get everywhere that you need to go, having a strong network of bikeways or streets that are prioritized for people biking to make it feel safe and comfortable help make it easier for you to get everywhere you need to go as a cyclist or as somebody walking, as well as someone driving. It's really just helping to ensure that our transportation system in Denver is a well-balanced one, and that people have options to decide how they can best make trips. Because as Denver grows, we're going to have to move more and more people in the same amount of space. And one of the best ways to do that is by providing different options and choices so people can make the best choice for them and what works best for that trip.
Thank you, Ellen. And yes, I do want to encourage anyone that has a question, feel free to barge in on my conversation with the panelist team. I hope we're answering some of the questions that are on your mind, but please do feel free to jump in, unmute yourself, and you can ask that question directly to the project team. One other question that we always hear asked in our community meetings, Ellen, coming to you, is does a neighborhood bikeway affect parking?
Great question. And this is something that we hear a lot in our public outreach as well as the surveys. And if others on the team want to chime in, please feel free. But a neighborhood bikeway does not significantly impact parking. Sometimes when we install bike lanes, protected bike lanes, because that is a separated space for people on bicycles, and there's only so much space that we're working with in between curbs, there are sometimes trade-offs, either a parking lane or a travel lane that might need to be repurposed to help make everything fit within curb to curb. With a neighborhood bikeway, because it's a shared condition, we're not really looking at significant parking impacts block to block. Where we might see small impacts is at the intersections. So where we're putting in improvements like curb extensions, like traffic circles, we're also often daylighting those intersections, which means pulling back the parking, normally about one space or so, and that helps to improve the sight lines and increase visibility for everyone using the road, whether you're in a car, on your feet, in a mobility device or on a bicycle, pulling back that parking helps to improve the sight lines and increase visibility. So those are really the types of impacts that we're looking at as part of a neighborhood bikeway, which is much different from the trade-off conversations that we have sometimes for other types of facilities, which can sometimes require more repurposement of parking than a neighborhood bikeway.
Thank you so much, Ellen and Hannah. Really do appreciate you answering these questions. Again, if you do have a question, please perk up one more time, last opportunity to ask a question. Ellen, I wanted to get back to you, and you were describing some tools that are used that prioritize pedestrians, flashing lights. Can you give another description of what that looks like and what kind of tools are used to help people safely cross intersections?
Yeah, great question. And Tiffany, Hannah, if you have other thoughts, please feel free to jump in. But just to speak to the spectrum of tools that we can use, at one end of the spectrum, we look at things like curb extensions or medians. That helps to carve out additional space and improve visibility for people walking and biking crossing the street, because it shortens the crossing distance and also improves those sight lines at the intersections. Some more intensive infrastructure improvements are things like the crossing improvements like an RRFB or a signal or a hawk. These are all basically fancy names for crossing improvements that involve lights or like a button that you push to activate it. And it indicates to cars that they need to yield to people walking and biking. So those people driving will see an indication that they need to yield. And those often are accompanied by marked crosswalks. Those are another tool in our toolbox that we can use as well. But this slide that we have here does show a lot of those options and tools in our toolbox that we can use. And to Hannah's earlier point, we look at a lot of data points to understand which option makes sense where. And what design is going to get us to our goal of creating that safe, comfortable crossing or shared street condition.
Thank you, Ellen. And I just want to remind our audience that this is not the last opportunity to ask the project team some questions. We're going to be talking about ways for you to stay engaged later in our presentation. But Sarah, if we could get back to the main deck, we're going to move on to our next phase. And that would be talking about a new community input tool that we'd like to introduce to you tonight. I'll hand it back to Ellen.
Thanks, Vanita. And again, if anyone does have questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll have this recording available where we have answered many of the questions that we've heard throughout the process to date. So as Vanita mentioned, we do have a tool that has the concept designs available for community feedback for the next few weeks. You can find it by going to this website. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/12th Ave Conveo. And once you're on this website, you will be able to read a little bit about the project. There is a fact sheet that describes what a neighborhood bikeway is. And after you read a little bit about that project and the overview of the corridor, you can scroll down where you can click the button that says give feedback on proposed designs. There's also, if you scroll a little further down, the concepts will load immediately for you. We've found if you're having trouble with loading or if you're viewing it on your phone, it's best to press that red button. It'll take you directly to the file and it can load a little bit easier. So once you click that button or just scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see the concept designs. You'll be taken to this page where you can click anywhere, you can zoom in, zoom out, and you can add a comment on your own or add a comment to someone else's comment about the designs to help us understand how the community is feeling about the concept. All comments will be forwarded to the design team and we'll use those as we continue to refine the design in the process. This is a long corridor, and because of that, oh, sorry, if we can actually go back a slide. Because of the length of the corridor, we've split the concept into several files. And so you're able to navigate to those different files at the bottom. You can see this arrow with it's pointing towards next or previous. That will take you to the next section of the corridor. You can also use the drop-down menu in the center here where it says current section. You can use that to go to the section that you're most interested in if you don't want to go through the full corridor. So once you navigate through the corridor, on the next slide, you will see what it looks like. So this is what the concepts look like. You can see drawings similar to what we talked about today, with callouts that help to explain what each of these design elements are and what they mean along the corridor. We'll be accepting community feedback on these concepts through June 18th. So please visit this site and share your thoughts before June 18th, because that will really help our project team as we continue to refine the design and move towards construction. So thank you again for making time to join us this evening. Really appreciate everyone carving out some time of their evening. We hope tonight's presentation was a helpful way to interact with the project team, get some questions answered. Do want to note that there are multiple ways to stay engaged with us as we move forward in the process. You can leave your comments on Conveyo. Again, that tool is going to be open and available through June 18th. So got a good few weeks there. You can visit that site at the link here. You can also RSVP for office hours to meet with our project team. These are short one-on-one conversations where we really follow any questions that you have or any agenda that you'd like to talk about. We're just there to answer your questions about the proposed designs for East 12th Avenue. So please take us up on that. You can RSVP at our project webpage. That's at bit.ly/Denver Moves Backbones. You can also join the stakeholder email list. That email list is not abused, I promise. We only send out important updates or information about meetings like tonight's meeting. To join that stakeholder list, please email bikes@denvergov.org with East 12th Ave in the subject line. And you can also access all of the project materials from the previous efforts that I mentioned, as well as this current effort, again, at the project website. That's bit.ly/Denver Moves Backbones. So with that, again, want to thank everyone for making time to join tonight. And I hope that you all have a lovely evening. But before I let you go, I did want to note that we do have a survey. This has been developed by an arm of Dottie that's focused on engagement with the community and with community businesses. And they've developed a survey to help us understand and course correct our meetings. If there's something that we could do better to make information more understandable to you or to help you feel more engaged in the process, we definitely want to hear it. So you can access this survey by taking a picture of this QR code or by going to the website bit.ly/Dottie, D-O-T-I, feedback. Really appreciate you all for filling out that survey. Again, that helps us continue to improve and do better as we continue to engage the community on bikeway projects as well as other infrastructure projects. And so with that, again, just want to thank everyone. Really appreciate you making time tonight. We look forward to receiving your feedback on Conveyo. Again, the comment period will close June 18th, so a few weeks from now. And I hope you all have a lovely and safe night. Thank you.